Welcome back, everybody. Here we are, still in the midst of the COVID-19 shutdown that is affecting the world. Starting to see the glimmer of hopefully things going back to normal soon. The talk of reopening some businesses, things are hopefully going to go back to normal soon. But one of the industries that is not going to go back to normal anytime soon is the aviation industry. We are seeing airlines shut down, airlines possibly going bankrupt. Literally hundreds of thousands of employees around the world are laid off with no real prospect of possibly going back to work. I mean, we've seen things like El Al, talking about bankruptcy, South Korean Air's talking about bankruptcy, South African Airways is basically dust. You know, the number of aircraft that have been grounded, things like the A380. This might be the end of the A380 as we know it. Lufthansa's said that 6 of their aircraft will no longer be flying. Air France is retiring them. KLM retired the 747 early. This is a watershed moment for the aviation industry. So considering how drastic this is affecting aviation, I figured it's a good segue to introduce the new series on my channel, and that is this aircraft history series. So in this I'll be going over, I talked about it in previous videos, I have a P-51 project that was going to be a PowerPoint at Vintage Wings. I might still do that in the future, but I figured this format's a little bit better for me to do, a little bit easier to go through online on the YouTube channel, get some of these unknown histories. This isn't just the everyday history of airplanes. This is the stuff that people may not have known about, or that they didn't quite get the whole story about it, or the obscureness of what's happened in the history. So that's what I like to go over with this. And we're going to start with an aircraft that I'm sure many people have seen and many of you have even flown on. So the aircraft that I will be covering today suffers from an issue only a few aircraft in history have had to deal with, such as the de Havilland Canada Beaver, things like the Douglas C-47, and that is that there's just no other aircraft out there that's able to do what it does. And that aircraft, believe it or not, is the Boeing 757. So I'm going to be going over the unknown history of the 757, where it came about, why it became what it became, and why airlines are having so much trouble replacing it today. And as always, my name is Sean, and this is Sean's Aviation. So the 757 is, to many of the aviation spotters out there, as well as the flying public, the most elegant airliner flying today. It has the right proportions, the right size, an imposing ramp presence, and looks great in the air. Powered by 2 turbofan engines, either Rolls-Royce RB211s or the Pratt & Whitney PW2000, the aircraft, by all rights, is overpowered. Meaning it can operate from short strips or even higher elevations out of reach of many other aircraft its size. It can carry 200 or so people and fly almost 3,900 miles. That's pretty amazing for an aircraft with such a short takeoff roll as the 757. So production started in 1981. And the last aircraft rolled off the production line in 2005. So again, that is a very long production run for a modern airliner. With 1,050 airframes being built in total. Now put that in perspective, there have been over 10,000 737s and only 1,000 757s were built. So that's part of the problem with the 757. So as of March of 2019, approximately 664, give or take. Now that has changed. That was as of March, early March of 2019. Now at this airline impact, I'm sure many more have been retired. I don't know the exact numbers right now, but as of beginning of March of 2019, 664 were still flying with airlines and flight departments around the world. So many people are aware that the 757 and the 767 were developed in tandem and share some common features. The cockpit is so similar that only a single type rating will allow you to fly both. If you can get checked out on the 757, you're also able to fly the 767, which is a small amount of conversion training needed. Not a full-fledged course, just a conversion training. And just to put it in perspective, here's some pictures of the cockpits. I mean, they're virtually indistinguishable. You cannot tell the difference between the 757 or the 767 cockpit. Now, as an aside, the early 767s, a number of early 767s that were delivered still came with a flight engineer's panel. Even though they were designed not to have a flight engineer, they still had someone sitting sideways because the airlines requested it. At the time, a two-man crew was very, very new. So many airlines still wanted that third person in the cockpit. So a number, a small, I've seen one so far, 767 that still had a flight engineer panel. So what is not known to many is that the two aircraft started out in two very, very different places and only joined up late in their respective design cycle. While the 767 began as the 7X7 study in 1972 as a wide-body replacement for the 707, what became the 757, and this is what most people don't believe, started out as a stretched 727. This is what's going to shock people. This is why I'm doing this video, because there are a lot of people who just do not know or will not believe how the 757 came about. So in the early 1970s, just after the 747 went into full production and entered service, Boeing turned to its next big project. Projects. One of them was a replacement for the 707 family, which would be dubbed the 7X7 and eventually become the 767. The other project was a plan to improve the 727 family, Boeing's highest-selling aircraft in the 1960s. The initial plan was to simply stretch the 189-seat 727-200 into the 727-300, with United Airlines initially providing input on the design, and there was interest from carriers such as Braniff International Airways. The design was slated to go into service late in 1975. However, there was a small group within Boeing working on another 727 variant, a design they dubbed the 7N7. This was a highly modified 727 with two high bypass turbofan engines, replacing three of the original engines. Now this will look familiar to anybody who's seen something along the lines of like the 717, which was an MD-80, which was modified and redesigned by Boeing, which was originally called the MD-95, and Boeing took that and modified it into the 717. But you'll see here's the picture of the early 727 7N7 project, which was effectively a 727 with only two engines. And it looks very similar to what the 717 initially became. However, you can still clearly see the 727 fuselage and profile and everything in it. But very interesting that it eventually did roll around as the 717, this concept of a twin-engined, high-bypassed 727. So, even though the plan was to go with the two high bypass engines, they realized that aerodynamically it just didn't work very well. So the design moved on and the engines were moved underneath a new, more aerodynamic wing, a new computerized flight deck, as well as new, lighter construction materials. All of these improvements were made to the stretched 727-300 fuselage, as well as the standard T-tail design. Now, looking back today, it is hard to believe that this would eventually turn into what we know today as the 757. So when the airlines interested in the new 727-300 saw the data from this new and improved 7N7 proposal, many decided they liked what they saw, and interest in the 727-300 started to falter to the point that Boeing eventually dropped the plans altogether. Although surprisingly, production of the 727-200 continued until 1984. As an aside to this history, it is interesting to note that at one point, Cargojet Airlines here in Canada was flying a 767-200 cargo-converted freighter, registration Charlie Golf, Charlie Juliet Oscar, that was older than five of the 727s that they were flying. To this day, it surprises me that the 727 stayed in production as long as it did. Five of their 727s were younger than one of their 767s. And when I found that out, it blew my mind that the 727s were being built after the 767 went into service. It just, for whatever reason, I just couldn't comprehend that at the time. So now, with Boeing officially backing the 7N7 program, progress began to ramp up and data began to be shared between this and the 7X7 program. So by 1978, the program centered on two models, the 160-seat 7N7-100 and the 180-seat 7N7-200. Later that year, both Eastern Airlines and British Airways signed contracts for a combined 40 7N7-200s, and in early 1979, the aircraft was officially named the 757. So with no interested buyers, the 757-100 program was officially dropped, with focus entirely moving on to the 757-200. As development progressed, the 757 began to adopt more and more of the features of the 767 program, which was a few months ahead in its development, and the 757 began to lose many of its shared design features of the 727 from which it originated. Eventually, the two programs were merged in order for Boeing to reduce its developmental costs and reduce its financial risks. This led in 1979 to a shared two-person glass cockpit, as well as a redesigned nose to allow for more cockpit room, eliminating the 727-style nose and cockpit windows. And that was basically the last vestige of the 727. Once that nose changed over to the more rounded 767 kind of style nose, every part of what made the 727 disappeared, and the 757 effectively became its own design. Again, it's interesting to realize that this happened so late in the project. So the wings were also redesigned to be closer to those of the 767, resulting in more fuel capacity, reduced drag, as well as the ability for the aircraft to be stretched later in its program. They built that into the design, knowing that this wing was going to be too much wing for the 757-200, allowing them and giving them room to stretch. And that is a very common design feature. You look at things like the C Series, which I will never call the A220, the Bombardier C Series, which is now the Airbus A220. The A220-300 is the base model, the 100 is a shrunken model, and then you can expand it to the 500. So it's designed specifically with stretching in mind. The A380 was designed the same way. That wing is way too big for the A380. There was capacity to stretch it. It never happened. You look at even the A319, A320, A321, it was all built in with the mentality of stretching into a longer program, so they designed this into the wing at the get-go. So by late 1979, the 727's T-tail was also gone, in favor of a traditional tail to both increase fuselage capacity as well as reduce the likelihood of an aerodynamic issue known as a deep stall that affected many T-tailed aircraft. If I can find a picture, I'm going to throw it up now to explain what a deep stall is. But it's effectively when the angle of attack gets so high, it's such a high angle, that the air coming off the wing, the disturbed air leaving the wing actually hits that T-tail and causes the tail itself to be in... Effectively, the tail stalls as well. So normally when you go into a stall, you still have rudder and elevator authority. In a deep stall, you lose your elevator authority as well because it is in the stall, the blanked space of the wing, and is basically effectively unrecoverable. So it's a very, very bad situation to get into, and many T-tailed aircraft are specifically designed to ensure that that doesn't happen. So at this point in design, the only feature of the 727 that remained was the common fuselage cross-section, the so-called pinched oval common to the 707, 727, and 737. Although not commonly known, while the forward fuselage retains the common cross-section, the rear fuselage is actually a perfect oval, meaning the bottom of the rear fuselage is actually lower than the forward fuselage. It just gets hidden due to that wing fairing mounted, splitting the two fuselages in half. Now, this is a common point too that I get when I tell this story to people, because I tell these stories to people in my daily life, believe it or not. The 757 fuselage does not line up. And I have walked people out in person and showed it to them. I have shown them pictures. I have shown them drawings. I have seen arguments on forums where people ask this on the internet. And they are literally ridiculed off the forum because people are like, there's people out there saying, you're crazy, it's not like that, it's an optical illusion. It's the same cross-section. It is not the same cross-section. I can literally put so many pictures, and I will put a whole bunch up here right now, showing that the cross-section does not line up. The fuselages do not line up. I will put them up. I will have lines drawn across the bottom of the fuselages. They don't touch. It doesn't work. The aircraft was specifically designed like this. And the main reason it was designed like this, the rear fuselage was designed deeper so that it would hold standard cargo containers. By this point in design, they realized that those cans, those metal boxes where all the bags are put in and then loaded onto planes, were a common feature for long distance, especially international flying. So they wanted to have the ability to carry the bags in these standard kind of containers in the back, where in the forward fuselage you would have more of a standard style cargo pit that you saw on older airplanes where all the bags were hand bombed in and piled inside. So I mean, the fact that I can argue that this argument is still happening when there is loads of evidence out there that it is designed like this astounds me. But there you have it. The 727 fuselage not lining up. It is not an optical illusion. If you see it, it is real. Believe me. So moving on. That was my rant for this video. Eastern Airlines flew the first revenue flight on January 1st of 1983, but despite its modern design and money-saving features, many airlines continued to purchase older, less expensive models, mostly due to the downturn in revenue after deregulation. And that's a big point. Deregulation was a huge part of the US aviation airline industry in the 1980s. And that was basically where before that, the government basically set the rules, who flew where, who flew what. Only certain airlines were allowed to fly at certain routes. After deregulation, it was a free-for-all. So many of the legacy airlines that were used to guaranteed money from guaranteed routes, they didn't have that anymore. So spending millions of dollars on new aircraft, not a smart idea when you did not know how much money you would be making and everything was out the window. Very similar to what's happening right now. So people didn't want to spend the money on new aircraft. So, by the late 1980s, increased regulation on noise, and this is the key, noise restrictions, brought a resurgence in sales of new airlines, looking to replace older, noisier models. Production peaked in the early 1990s at almost 100 aircraft a year, and the 757 found its niche on both heavy domestic legs as well as thinner, longer-range routes, especially with the European charter market. In 1996, Boeing announced a stretched model, the 757-300, adding 23 feet in length and room for 50 more passengers. Despite matching the 767-200 for capacity and range at a reduced operating cost, few airlines jumped on the new aircraft and only 55 were produced. With a declining backlog and no sign of new sales, in 1999, Boeing began to reduce aircraft production rates. After the terror attacks of 9/11, air travel as a whole declined and many airlines canceled or greatly reduced their new orders. Those that did look to new aircraft tended towards smaller 737s and A320s, not only for the reduced risk, but many of the 757s were relatively low time and there was no need for a replacement. Production of the 757 ended in 2004 when the last airframe destined for Philippine Airlines rolled off the factory floor. Now, the amazing thing is there has been no replacement aircraft designed for the 757. With the oldest aircraft now 37 years old and the youngest only 15. And that's still relatively old for an airline. Considering the program timeline for a clean sheet design, the youngest of these aircraft will be well over 20 years old before a replacement is produced, if a program was to begin today. As I mentioned, the airline downturn after the events of 9/11 created a drastic reduction in aircraft purchasing a few years later. Just as the airline's fortunes were turning around, we hit the financial crisis of 2008, again putting pressure on airlines to cut costs. This, however, came at a time when many of the aircraft purchased in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s were beginning to reach the end of their useful life and would need to be replaced. With the downturn in the economy, efficiency was the name of the game. The drive for wide-body long-haul, getting somewhere in one shot without a fuel stop, carrying as many people as possible to reduce costs, led to the development of the Boeing 737 and the A380 and A340 in the early 90s, the A380 in the late 2000s, and then Boeing 787 and the Airbus A350s in the 2010s. Boeing, meanwhile, had gone and updated the 747 into the 747-800, although the sales of that are not the best, and are currently working on the 777X, which also just flew a few weeks ago, making its maiden flight. So I wrote the script for this about 2 months ago before a lot of stuff happened, so I'm updating it as I go. So the 777X, which is a more efficient version of their staple long-haul program. In the short-haul market, both Boeing and Airbus went ahead with modernizing their existing designs, resulting in the 737 MAX family, as well as the A320neo, or the new engine option. The classics are called CEO, which is the classic engine option. And then Bombardier got into the game with the C Series, although, as I said before, it's now the A220, which I will never call it the A220. So this push for efficiency across the board and the expansion of the long-haul market has meant that the somewhat niche routes that the 757 was used on has been ignored by most new designs. Airbus touts the A321XLR as a replacement, and while it carries roughly the same number of passengers and it can fly roughly the same distance, it doesn't have the same performance of the 757 and is unable to reach some of the smaller airports that made the 757 such a popular aircraft. Boeing had, when I say the word had, announced plans for the NMA, new mid-size aircraft, and it's also called the MUM, the middle of market aircraft. So it fits in between the 737, the short and long haul, so it's the middle of the market. Now, unfortunately, Boeing has announced that it won't make a decision to offer the aircraft to airlines till after 2019, and considering what's happened in 2019 and 2020, it probably isn't very likely at this point. So it does mean that a decision whether to go forward or not won't happen until later in 2020, but as I said, right now it's not looking good. So as an aside to this, like I said, I did write this script a while ago, so the 737 MAX is still grounded after its issues. Many airlines have canceled orders due to not only the grounding issue, but now the downturn in the airline market. So many aircraft are purging these orders from their books to clear up financial space and get the books looking just a little bit better financially. The A320neo, still doing okay. Again, most new orders are put on hold. Many airlines are just being parked in the deserts. As I said, A380s are being parked. Lufthansa has announced A330s being retired, A340-600s being retired. They've retired some A320s. Air Canada has begun retiring some of the A320s. It's going to be interesting to see where this all pans out in the long run. But continuing on, so with the safety issues that currently plague both the 737 MAX as well as now with the 787, there's been some small issues. And considering that the 777X has yet to flown, but it has flown, but it hasn't entered service yet, I firmly believe that Boeing's proposed aircraft is many years away. And it was as many years away when I wrote this before the current COVID situation. It's going to be even farther away, if ever, soon. So it is unfortunate for such an amazing aircraft to effectively age out without a replacement, forcing airlines to either fly a wide body only partially full or use a smaller plane that might have to make a number of fuel stops in order to complete the flight. I am a firm believer that considering how the 757 program matured alongside the 767, a replacement aircraft designed in tandem with the 787, itself a 767 replacement, would have been fitting. Keeping as many parts common between the two would have kept the risk down, and Boeing would have made off like bandits considering the utter lack of competition in this market. And now I say that, I mean it even more now. If they had designed the 787 and a 750, let's call it the 797, in tandem, the same way the 57 and 67 were done in tandem. Call it, same wing, same landing gear, same engine. Make the 87 a wide body, make the 97 a narrow body, composite fuselage, very commonality between the two. These aircraft would have been in service now for 10 years, and we would not be having these issues we're having now. So hindsight is 2020. That's just my opinion. So we'll see what happens. So in conclusion, the 757 is an amazing aircraft. Okay guys, sorry about that. My battery died on me, had to get it charged. So it's a little bit later, but I want to get this video finished up. So as I was saying, it is fitting that I wrote this video, and I'm filming this when I did because just a little while ago at the 2019 Paris Air Show, Airbus has announced 200 firm commitments or orders for the new Airbus A321XLR. And this is their long-range A321, so they've basically upped the fuel load and they've upped the max takeoff weight, and that's supposed to get them, so the 321 can hold roughly the same number of passengers as a 757, and this extra fuel and extra takeoff weight means it can actually carry enough fuel to fly almost the same distance as a 757 could. And they're trying to become a direct competitor for the 757, because as I've said, 757s are being retired. There's no new aircraft that can fit it, so they've literally stretched that 321, 320, 321 model as much as they could to its absolute limit in order to try to compete with the 757. So this shows how much of a market there is for an aircraft that can replace the 757. And Airbus has announced that they were going forward with the 797-800, although as I said, with COVID, who knows how long that is going to be pushed off for. I said the MAX is still severely grounded. They have no timeline for that yet. So when they're going to start to spend the literal billions of dollars it's going to cost them to produce, to design, and get the 797 off the ground, when they're already dealing with billions of dollars of issues with the 737 MAX, is an unknown. I mean, as I was saying with the returns of leases, the number of airlines as well as leasing companies. I mean, Air Canada has officially announced that they're not taking their full order of 737s. There's a number of other airlines that have backed out of commitments. GCAS, the General Electric commercial aircraft leasing services, they have backed out of, I believe, like 70, something like that, orders. So there's a huge hit to the Boeing order book. So not only are they losing money with the grounding of the MAX, now they're losing money because their workers aren't even working because of, shutdowns due to COVID. But now the airlines are being battered and they're returning aircraft, which means the sales they were counting on aren't even going to happen. So it's going to be very interesting to see where Boeing goes with this middle of the market. It might just be the fact that Airbus runs away with this, and by the time the middle of the market aircraft comes around, there's no need anymore, because Airbus has stolen that. Between the downturn in the aviation economy and the reduction in the need for aircraft, and Airbus already having something on the market that can fulfill a requirement, Boeing may be out of the game. So be interesting to see where we go. I might be filming an update video in the next year or two for this to see where we end up going. So hopefully we see something in the future for a 757 replacement. I had part of where I was going to go with this video was talking about the possibility of doing a 737 MAX style rebuild of the 757. Take the fuselage that they have, take the wing, take what works. Boeing has to have the jigs around somewhere to build a 757 again. Take what works, put a brand new glass cockpit onto it, put some carbon fiber into it to lighten the load a little bit, aerodynamically spruce it up. It's a pretty good aircraft as it is, but tweak the design just enough to bring the 757, a new build 757, into a modern era. I don't think it's going to happen. With what they're doing with the MAX, I think their days of updating airframes are done, and I think you're going to see a push for a clean sheet design and a much more stringent testing, structure, in order to ensure issues such as what we're seeing with the MAX today don't happen in the future. So hopefully we can see a replacement for the 757. It's going to be a sad day when there are no more 57s flying in the world. At least we do have these cargo conversions that are happening. Cargojet does fly the 757 cargo. FedEx flies the 757 cargo. DHL, there's a number of them out there. So they are having a second lease on life as these converted cargo aircraft. Hopefully we can keep seeing them flying. I mean, there's a couple of private ones floating around. We see one regularly here in Ottawa. It's pretty cool to see a privately owned 757. But you never know. One day, hopefully we will see something that can do what the 757 can do. So everyone, thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned for more videos coming out soon. Hopefully with this summer downturn, with the fact that we're not going to see as many air shows this summer, I can pump some more of this style video out. So if you like this, comment down below. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, what I can do better. I do know that my I'm going to call it my production quality isn't quite where some people are expecting it to be, or where even I would like it to be. But I'm limited with what I can do due to technology, such as this camera, as well as time, trying to fit time to do what I'm doing right now into my life with a full-time job and 3 young kids and a family and all those other things that need to be done. So For all of you out there who are watching this, thank you so much. Like, subscribe, follow, comment, share, everything you can to get the word out that I am doing this. And if you enjoy it, if you don't enjoy it, thank you for sticking it out for this long. I'm sure there's enough out there for you guys to enjoy. I can't please everybody. So thank you again for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching, guys, and as always, if you are interested in any of the content you see, you can access my website at www.seans-aviation.com. You can see all the latest pictures of aircraft and museums and the build logs of all of my current models and past models on that site. And if you're interested in any of this content, please click the subscribe button here on YouTube to follow more. Thank you very much, and see you guys next time.